Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Monica Jean. I am an educator at Michigan State University Extension. So, hot topic. We have all these wonderful specialists on here, or a lot of them. And so, feel free to ask any question you may be wondering about from the season. It's quite an open forum today. We do have one I know to start with, and that actually would go ahead and be Manny. So, Manny, are you on still?
I am.
All right.
I didn't know you wanted me to go first, so
Well, you
yeah.
already were loaded with beautiful slides, so I figured why not?
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Get it
Good morning.
going.
All right. So yeah, something very quick. I got few queries on this topic in corn. Think got a couple of pictures. I'm showing one right here. You can see this corn plant looks little weird, right? I mean, you can see a little bit of yellowing on that new leaves, and you can see some of this these notches on the edge of the leaf, right? So folks were wondering what's going on with this plant, right? And there's multiple things we can think about. Chris DeFanzo and I talked, and we were like, yeah, that's not an insect issue because there's no leaf tissue missing per se, right? And then we thought about any herbicide injury. This is not a typical symptom of herbicide injury, any as well, any like growth regulator or inhibitor, like 2,4-D or metallochlor, things like that. So what we came about to be that this is what we call a rapid growth syndrome. Has multiple names that you all might have heard about. Twisted walls is one, buggy whipping is another one, and it's pretty much a physiological response of a corn plant to fast growth that's driven by some of these environmental conditions that Jeff has been talking about recently, right? These hot temperatures that are driving really faster growth in corn, right? So that's pretty much the driver here. And you can see this was a little bit of a late stage symptom. So you can see some early stage symptoms that you probably all have seen out in the field. This picture from Purdue shows us a nice, sort of that yellow leaf, and it's caused by this is to me is sort of a start of this phenomena, right? That buggy whipping. You can see the world sort of twisted in some of these pictures. That's where it all begins when the plant is growing very fast and it's unable to sort of, unfurl those leaves, and then they get sort of, stuck to each other, and that's where again some of the yellowing happens, and then eventually the plant comes out of it, right? And be able to develop normally. In terms of management, there's nothing we recommend or can do about it. In terms of any yield implications, there are pretty much none or very minimal. The only issue is if this goes along for a little longer, and the plant has a delayed development. It gets behind, by maybe a couple of leaf stages compared to its neighboring plants. That's when any minor yield implications can occur. Other than that, yeah, it might just look a little ugly, but yeah, that's pretty much it, and the plant should be able to grow out of it. I don't know if anyone else has seen this recently in the fields, but yeah, that's pretty much all I had.
Awesome. Thanks, Manny. It is a very unique look going on there.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions about the impact or concerns with this rapid growth? How common is it that have you seen this before in Michigan?
Yeah, I have actually. Yeah, we do a lot of these planting date studies, and it's kind of interesting, when you see it. It can start anywhere from like V5 to V7 growth stage. So it's very like dependent on if your plants were around that growth stage when some of these environmental conditions are happening, right? When we are getting a lot of heat, and there's enough moisture in the ground, or sometime it even starts, there isn't enough moisture. Now there's a lot of heat, plant is trying to grow quicker. So based on that growth stage, sometimes we do see that in some planting dates, but not in others. I have seen it even as late as like V10 or V12 plant. After that, I think I have not seen that, and I haven't seen anything in literature. So typically the timing is anywhere from V5, V6 to V10 ish. Somewhere in that. It does not happen as often, actually, but yeah, I definitely have seen it. And I was just curious if anyone else has noticed this at
Yeah.
least this year or in the past few.
We have a couple more questions coming in about it, Manny. Like, is there any varietal? influence over it, certain
Yeah,
kinds
that's
of
a good
grown.
point. So there are some hybrid differences. I think some hybrid genetics are more prone to this. I have seen that, yeah, in a couple of our trials where, we're looking at different relative maturities and things like that, and one is doing it, the other is not. So I have seen, I think, some hybrid susceptibility, so to speak, to this phenomena. But again, pretty much, it's a cosmetic issue, and the plant simply grows out of it. Some of these, again, this second picture, this buggy whipping, this can be, again, I don't know if Christy or Aaron want to comment on that. I think some of the herbicides might cause something similar. So you have to be aware again, and you have to be careful about what are the underlying reasons behind those symptoms. But what I'm talking about, yeah, there isn't any yield implication regardless of the hybrid, although some are more prone.
That was the next question. Any other causes possible? So it sounds like herbicide could.
I
Yeah,
can
yeah.
chime in super quick. I'm gonna start
Awesome.
getting a kid ready soon, so I'll do that now. Um, Group 15, so in corn, we have things you can apply that have safeners in them, and that would be pre-emergence herbicides. And the only time you'd see this like leaf unfurling issue or buggy whipping is with our pre-emergence herbicides that contain one of those group 15 herbicides, and they emerge out of the ground looking like that. So this is very different this symptomology appears so much later in the season.
All right, that's all the questions right now we have on the buggy whip. I did get that's fun to say. I did get a question coming in about insects. Chris, awesome, there you are. Although I do like your little Lego.
I
That's a
could put it
fun
back
thing.
if you'd
Yeah,
like.
okay.
I think so. The question was about trapping.
Mm-hmm.
Trap numbers seem low. So black cutworm and true armyworm, when we trap for those are coming north to south. So we're at, the mercy of the weather patterns and the populations in the south. So that has really nothing to do with Michigan per se. We're not driving that, whether we get a lot of them or not. It's Jeff's fault, or, a lot of them have that the populations have grown very high in the south and that they're moving. So this year we've been pretty fortunate. Uh, European corn borer, we have a bunch of traps out this year of the different. There's different strains, E, Z, which is our typical Iowa strain, and then a hybrid. And I've caught a big fat zero on those lures. But on the other hand, I'm trapping near mostly BT corn. So if I was near maybe a non-BT kind of situation, maybe an organic grower, I might be catching some. There is corn borer out there in Southwest Michigan. I've seen some pictures in Indiana, maybe where the seed corn industry is located, and there's like and some of the organic folks. So it's always there. It has lots of other hosts. It's just waiting for something bad to happen. But I don't have any in my traps, and that's typical because I'm in regular production area. And Western beans just starting, it's doing its thing. It's neither high nor low at this point. It's sort of right on time. So I'm kind of in the teens for my trap catches, and probably other ones on my map I see are pretty similar.
Mine are very low as well, yes.
Yep. Yeah, but we're just starting. It's only the first week of July, and typically those peaks are going to be in another 3 weeks or so.
Hmm. I
Yep.
only had a couple reports of slugs this season. I think that our weather just wasn't as conducive. And they were back in the fields that were really bad last year with soybeans.
Yeah.
Some damage caused in corn, but the corn pretty much grew out of it. Like
I
it,
know you love slugs. We're moving on from slugs though.
well, I
So
thought I mentioned
yeah.
I still get a lot of questions. Also a lot of deer damage coming in, but that's a whole conversation. I just wanted to
Always have 4 legs, not 6. So
It looks like here we had one more question, Chris, and that was about army worm. Someone
uh-oh.
walked in their sprayer trucks last night and saw a lot of army worm. Should they be concerned? They're almost an inch long.
Okay, so I don't know where Larry's at. I see this question here. When they're armying, they're moving. So that means they're looking for something better, especially if the wheat's drying down. The big thing at this time with armyworm would be head clipping. And I think in most of the fields I've seen, that head clipping would be kind of done. Because when they clip the head, what I notice is they get to that point where they clipped and they feed on the juices that are coming out there. It's almost like a little drink sort of for them. But when the wheat is dried down, then they've got to move somewhere. So they're going to move out of the field into the roadside. If they move into soybean, that's not an issue. If they're going over to a neighboring cornfield, that could be a problem. I would look at that edge. I You could just do an edge treatment if you needed to, but when they're big, when they're getting to that size of your pinky, they're probably about ready to pupate. So we seem pretty late. I'm guessing they're kind of, I haven't seen a picture of this field. This is probably towards the end of their time frame, I'm guessing.
He's in Deckerville, it's just Sanilac County.
Yeah, so that's getting ripe up there. So, I mean, unless they were, and at this point, are you gonna, go through your wheat and run it over? No, you're not going to. You'd be concerned about the corn that's adjacent. But what I've seen, usually they'll get into that roadside first and kind of eat the ditch, and then they'll sort of move out into the cornfield if that's adjacent.
We had quite a few questions come in and a comment too, which I like those. Jeff, there is one for you. Wanted to know what that dragon fire pick in your presentation's about.
I think I'm going to have to go back and look at that
Okay, you'll
one.
come back. And then maybe this one's easier. Okay, well, you look. Extreme precipitation and flooding events are going on throughout the country. Is there risks for flooding in
Yeah.
Michigan with current weather patterns? And what's the largest rainfall event we've had and where was it?
Interesting question. Of course, we all can, I think, appreciate the or understand the timing. And I'm actually am working on a couple of images, and I will share those here with the group. But even though the tragic events here in Texas of the last week, there are parallels, and I think it's important to use those and remember because some of the trends that are occurring and have been observed in Texas are also observed here in Michigan. And unfortunately, as many of you know, and you've heard me talk about this, Michigan is gradually getting warmer, but it's especially getting wetter in terms of the long-term climate. And with the wetter climate, it's both because we have more days with precipitation, but it's also because we have more heavy events. And one of the things that's relevant here in terms of the question, why it's important, the really heavy events, and typically we look at what 2 inches or greater in a given day. Those are extreme events. Those events are increasing in frequency. And it's not just Michigan, but it's across the Great Lakes region. And so again, it's my dad. Oh, you can always have too much of a good thing, and this is true. We obviously want the water, but not when it's like that. And so these extreme events are increasing with time, not just increasing in frequency, but also increasing in intensity. And one example of that, the question was, well, what's the all-time record? Well, it's just short. It's 12.95 inches now. And it's a new record. It's only a couple years old, and it was set over in Mason County, in West Central Lower here again a couple years ago. And I was involved in the committee that reviewed the records and so forth. But one of the things to think about with that too, it not only set a new record. The old record was around 10 inches, and it was in Bloomingdale in the southwestern lower, but it went all the way back 100 years. And so that record for 24-hour maximum rainfall had stood. Another piece of this looking at, I mentioned a 1 in 100 year event for some of the rain that fell, for example, really heavy rain in the thumb yesterday. Excuse me. For most of Michigan, especially as we go north, the 1 in 100 year event is somewhere on the order of 4.5 to 5 inches. That's really top end of what we would typically see for 24-hour period. But where does 12.95? Well, that's off the charts. We're seeing more of those extreme events occurring, and again, those are the ones that are problems. There's just nowhere for the water to go, and so that's a pretty wordy extended response, but again, we have to look and just, well, horrible and tragic events in Texas, but it's a reminder this is happening too. It's something at least you need to think about. And I would say, especially in terms of drainage, and in terms of where water can go, where it can pond, and when we have too much of it, because that trend is definitely happening. And just like it is in the Southern Great Plains, it's happening here too. Sorry
Thank
for the
you.
long answer.
No, you're good. Do you know about your dragonfly? We can
I
get back to you, Jeff. It's no big deal.
I'll go back here and
Okay.
look in just a second. Yeah, it was. And where was it in the
It
or
said
was
in
it?
your presentation.
Okay, I'll go back and
All
look.
right. All right. Thank you so much, though, Jeff, for that overview. That was great. Marty, are you available?
Yeah, so I think the first question was with respect to TarSpot. So just as of yesterday, we had some confirmations come in that I feel are legitimate. There was a couple of others that were circulating, but it just didn't quite look right, and I asked for a sample and didn't get it. So anyway, yesterday we had a confirmation in Eaton County and Cass County, and no surprise. I mean, it's going to be there. It's somewhere in the fields. Um, it's still pretty early in terms of fungicide applications. So typically what we want to do, especially if we're only going to make a single application, is try and wait until tassel, if not a little bit beyond that. And again, ideally what we would be doing is, by field, getting an idea of what is there and then spraying at the right time, for tar spot if that's what we're really concerned with. In terms of risk as well, I do just want to share this slide. So we have so that map I just showed you is the crop protection network. So it's all in the crop protection network now. So Google crop protection network and then search around there or include tar spot map in your search and that'll pop up. So we used to have apps on the phones and they're just really expensive to maintain because you have to keep programming the apps to keep them up to date. So what we've done now is gone to this website-based system for our disease forecasting tools. So what was Tar Spotter on the app is now available on this website. Again, it's through the Crop Protection Network, and you can see actually that risk for tar spot has decreased over the last couple of weeks. So that snap of cool temperatures we had a couple of weeks ago really were very favorable in all of the modeling work that we've done. Temperature is a really strong driver of tar spot, more so than moisture. Moisture is important, and in fact, when we see too much moisture, we actually start to see a slight negative response in terms of a little bit less disease, which doesn't make sense, right? But that's what we see. So moisture is important, but the more important factor is cool temperatures. And as you can see, that tar spot risk is decreased. On this site, we also have grey leaf spot risk prediction as well. That's a newer model, a little bit less tested than the tar spot model, but that's just something else that's available there. So you click through these different tabs and you can pull up different models. And here's the soybean model. And this gets to Mark Seaman's question about these warmer temperatures. And yes, these warmer temperatures will reduce the risk of white mold. And so here we can see that the risk of white mold has also dropped as that's temperature sensitive. Whereas frog eye leaf spot, is perhaps starting to increase a little bit. Frog eye is generally not a huge issue for us in Michigan. Still important to keep an eye on. That's just showing how that risk in the models are starting to trend out there. Were there any other specific questions?
There's another one that just popped in. Oh, is the risk of tar spot far greater compared to the gray leaf spot or northern leaf spot?
Let me go back then. So we don't have a northern leaf blight model up yet. I know we're working on one. But yes, so Phil, what you're seeing here, like today, that point there, we do have a much higher risk for grey leaf spot and lower risk for tar spot. So all of these different pathogens have different temperature optima. Grey leaf spot likes warm temperatures. We certainly get grey leaf. Northern leaf blight is perhaps a little bit more of a concern, perhaps in Michigan, depending on where we're at and hybrids we're growing. But yeah, that's correct. So tar spot risk has decreased and grey leaf spot has increased. But it's also, you've got to get out there. These are just risk models based on conditions.
Mm-hmm.
You have to get out there and check to see if those diseases are actually in your fields, right? You have to have the pathogen there to cause that issue.
Okay, some good old integrated pest management is what I'm hearing.
Yep.
Awesome. And then I believe you answered about the beginning of the white mold pressure, but did you mention the drone application portion?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I have some slides I could pull up, but essentially, My colleagues in Wisconsin have been doing a little bit of work on drone applications. So I have data from a couple of years ago, and they demonstrated that yeah, you could use a drone for white mold application, which was pretty neat. Um, I think the most important thing is making sure that the product gets down into the canopy onto flowers. So I don't care how you're making that application, but those droplets have to get down in there, right? So you could do a bad job with a ground rig, you could do a bad job with a drone. So just being aware and trying to make sure that we get good canopy penetration is important.
Awesome. I just want to mention if anybody wonders where these links to some of the stuff like Marty Crop Protection Network, we do try to link all these resources and the notes that go with like the podcast. So if you're looking for them later, you'd like to access them, they're also there. We had another question here about does gray leaf spot affect yield as bad as tar spot?
Absolutely. But in Michigan, I'd say grey leaf spot is generally less of a concern. Last year, actually, we set up with Phil um, up in the thumb there some drone spray strips, and we were kind of hoping to get tar spot. I mean, not for the farmer, but for the research. And we didn't get any tar spot right there, but we did get a lot of northern leaf blight. It was amazing how much we got there. So anyway, northern leaf blight is probably a little bit more of a concern than grey leaf, and then tar spot, of course, can be very significant. And it comes back again, talking about integrated pest management, variety susceptibility. Like that is one of the underlying fundamental keys here to disease management. If you're growing something that's really susceptible, even if you spray a fungicide, it's probably not going to do enough. So I think learning through the seasons and what's working, what's not working, being careful of those susceptible hybrids is really important.
Awesome. Thank you, Marty. I think that's all we have for right now for disease questions. I did have another question back for Jeff about weather. Oh, of course it's about weather. It's for Jeff, right?
Say
Someone did
what?
ask, what about the
No.
24-hour? Oh, looking for, thank you. What about the 24 hours in September of 1986?
Mm. Well, probably somebody from the local or parts of central lower Michigan. That is one of the landmark benchmark heaviest rain events and was certainly on our record in history for Michigan that led to catastrophic flooding. So unfortunately, we do have some events in our record that they're not quite like what we saw in Texas because of the landscape and so forth there in the last week. But that 86 event is near the top of the books for especially when we looked at prolonged rainfall over several days. And that's that the heavy rain that occurred in that event was a prolonged event and just inundated everything at a time, ironically, when typically the soil moisture is usually lower at that time, and it's going towards the bottom of the annual cycle. But that September of 86 still stands in the books, unfortunately, as one of our records for and there are some individual sites that still those records still stand for both 24 and certainly for 72 hour. We look at longer periods as well because again that event was prolonged over several days.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, there was a comment about MSU using cover crops and no-till in our production acres for the animal herds on campus. Kind of a suggestion, be nice if we did that because we are suggesting it and working with the farmers on doing it. So I guess if any of the specialists have any comments about, I know that's going through an evolution right now with the expansion and everything. I don't know what the production system will look like then, but if any of the specialists have comments on it, you're welcome to um, say something or go ahead and respond to Phil here in the chat. Phil, I see your suggestion. I think it's a great suggestion. I have no control. I'm sorry. Um, so we'll go ahead and move on here. We have a question for dealing with lodged wheat at harvest. I don't know if I saw Dennis Pennington was on.
I think Dennis may not be on this morning.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm on.
Oh, you
Oh, great.
are.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Super.
Well, good, because guess
Yep.
what? You got a question. You got any tips on lodged
Yeah,
wheat harvest?
lodged wheat is hard to deal with, other than just you have to go down and try to get it as much as you can. Fields that have lodged wheat, you want to try to make them your first fields to harvest. Depending on when it lodged, will depend on how much damage is done to it. You can get there's increased risk for, later infections in the season and things like that. Um, and just I would worry a little bit about quality and if you got a lot of downed wheat. So try to get it harvested as soon as you can. But there there's not any magic way to make it stand back up to combine it. So yeah, unfortunately it's just you're gonna have to deal with it.
When we're in these instances that we're getting in and out of our cab a lot and having to deal with stuff like this, I just want to mention too, safety is so important during harvest time. We're often tired and rushing and dealing with all sorts of messes. So just make sure that you keep your safety in mind when you're
Right.
doing those things. Awesome. Thank you, Dennis. I think unless you had anything else to note about wheat harvest, I know it started around the Saginaw Bay area. I saw quite a fields going in it'd be Saginaw County yesterday. Um, do you have anything else you want to note for a wheat update while we got you?
Not other than just harvest so far. Most guys are pretty happy with the yields they're finding. So far, we haven't had any reports of poor falling number or high vomitoxin levels in the grain. With the frequent, every few day rainfall, I would be a little concerned about maintaining a good falling number. So get in there and get your field harvested as soon as you can. Um, if with these frequent every few day rainfalls, that can increase your or decrease your falling number, which is what you don't want. So it might be worth paying a little bit of drying charge rather than trying to wait for the next window when you can get your grain down to 12, 13 or 14%. So I would definitely encourage, harvest as soon as you can get in there and reasonably um, get it off the field. There are some elevators that will take care of drying charges under, 19, 20%. But you still have to pay shrink. So not everybody offers that, but it would be worth checking in with them to see what your local elevator can do if you don't have your own drying capabilities on your own farm.
Okay, and then would an air assist reel help with lodged wheat?
An air assist reel is not going to help with picking up lodged wheat. What the air assist reel would help, I mean, you still got to get that cutter bar down below below the heads in order to get them up in there. Maybe it would help, blow the heads back in, so that you're not clipping them off and they fall on the ground rather than going into the head. I guess that's possible. Um, but a stripper head actually works pretty decent. There's not a lot of stripper heads in Michigan, but I did ride in a combine with a guy a couple days ago, and yeah, on down wheat, it picks it up and actually does a nice job of handling downed wheat.
Okay. All right. So I have two things left in the chat box. I've got something about herbicide and I got something about irrigation. So just let's work through those two. We're getting close on time here. I'll try to get everything answered, but let's get those done and then we'll see what we got left. So, Christy, did you see that question about glufosinate?
Yeah, so it looks like the question was, will Liberty or glufosinate kill horse nettle or and common cockleburr? It should be pretty good on cockleburr. Horse nettle again is one of those perennial weeds. It is very difficult to control. It may burn the tops off, but it's going to come back just because it's a perennial. And there's just not a lot of good options for horse nettle control.
Yeah. Oh man. Goats? Would goats be an option, Chrissy, to have goats? I'm just kidding.
If they like the thorns on there, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. And anything else to note about the condition for weeds and going on in the field before we wrap up here?
I think one of the things is a good time to do some scouting. I mean, there's probably some water hemp escapes The other thing to just kind of keep in the back of your mind is a lot of the labels do have some cutoffs, whether it's, up to the full flower stage or, up to flowering. There's also some pre-harvest intervals. So just kind of keep those things in mind when you're putting on some of those rescue treatments.
Okay, thanks. And then as we get towards the end of the season, if you have soybean fields with weeds in it that you're concerned about, we can submit those for resistance testing for free. So just keep that in mind. Awesome. Thanks, Christy, so much for the update. We are also moving on to Lyndon. I saw your link. Do you have a 2 cents you want to share?
Yeah, thanks, Monica. Just real quick, Angie Gratis, a new irrigation agent down in Southwest Michigan, has been posting her irrigation recommendations at the website that I put up there. There's a few areas in Southwest Michigan that have received less than an inch of water since mid-May. And so things are dry, and there's a lot of discussion about low water levels and that dry cycle. It's really a good time for irrigators to make sure you can justify, in other words, irrigation scheduling or some means to say that you make scientifically based decisions for your water use. And Angie does a good job of giving you some recommendations there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We had a question about getting information purchasing farm equipment, as far as drills and downforce and row cleaners. We've had a specialist out of Canada, and that's who I have sent some farmers to. He's very willing to help farmers here in Michigan. I am blanking on his name right now. If anyone else could think of it, otherwise Clay, if you can send me your email, I could find it later and send you the guy's contact information. Anybody else thinking of his name? Okay, hearing none, I'm not the only one that
Are
forgot.
you talking about Ian who does tillage?
He presented with someone that's really good.
Oh,
Yeah, I have it say. Oh, I'll have to look for it. Just if you could send me an email, Clay, I'll help you with that. Okay. Um, it looks like we're moving back into wheat territory here. Dennis, any tests done on how falling numbers happen after a rain? Is it advantageous to harvest when it's still high moisture or wait for it to naturally dry? If possible, after rain is when the falling numbers occur, correct?
Yeah, so that's a very complicated issue. And we are doing research to try to address this and figure some of this out. Basically, what happens is the level of dormancy in a seed is variable from variety to variety. And normally, when wheat seed matures, you want it to remain dormant until if you're going to plant, save seed and plant that in the fall, you wouldn't want that to start to germinate until you plant it in the ground. Well, frequent rainfall after you've reached physiological maturity can cause the seed to think that maybe it's time to germinate. And what happens is you get alpha amylose activity or alpha amylase activity that starts to convert starch down into sugars, and it starts to actually germinate the seed. And that's what lowers the quality. And when that occurs, when you run a falling number test, you get a lower falling numbers. So there's pre-harvest sprout. There's another thing that causes poor falling number, and that's called late maturity alpha amylase. That has to do with an abrupt drop in temperatures at Feek's 11.2 growth stage prior to physiological maturity. But it's really complicated, and I'd be happy to spend more time talking about it, but we can't cover it all here. But so what do you do in the field? You want to get harvested before probably 2 to 3 rainfalls, if possible, after it has dried down close to your harvest maturity. Once you get to 20, after you've had 2 to 3 rainfalls on it, your risk of having a poor falling number, it goes up significantly. So try to get it harvested, whether it's at the high moisture or a lower moisture. I don't think that matters too much on the falling number. It's can you get it out of the field before that next rainfall? Because that next rainfall will want it to try to germinate and grow again.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. So I know that I think you have an article on it. If
Yeah,
you are able to grab it and put it in the chat box too, and that'd be
okay,
another great resource to share.
sure.
Oh, there you go, Jenna. Thank you, Jenna. She got it on there for you. So, that's a good resource I think to read overall. So, alrighty then. We are at 8 a.m. and there is one more question from a farmer. So, we're gonna answer it because I just can't leave one out. Christy, if you're still on, I'm hoping, or Aaron, I guess. All right. Well, bummer. We had a herbicide question, but we'll have to wait for next year or next time. Sorry, I apologize. With that, since we are at 8:01, we're going to go ahead and wrap up today. I would like to thank everyone for another successful um, open topic time. I greatly appreciate it. If we didn't get to answer a question as you get off, if you want to go ahead and drop your email into the chat box, we can make sure to get it back, get an answer back to you. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a wonderful day and also be safe out there as we start wheat harvest. Thanks, everyone.